So this summer is looking good for the film industry. There's a lot of movies coming, especially this coming month of June. Starting off, we have Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, which I am personally very excited for. I mean, I love the first Spider-Verse a lot. It's one of my favorite movies of all time. And now we're getting a sequel this Friday on June 2nd, 2023, and I'm planning to go see it um, this coming weekend. So that looks pretty good. That's gonna be amazing. And then there was the new Transformers movie, Rise of the Beast. This is a prequel set in between Bumblebee and the first Transformers. It looks pretty good, and thankfully Michael Bay's not directing it. I might watch it at some point. Well, I probably will whenever I get Paramount Plus, and it'll stream there at some point. Then there's Elemental. This is the newest movie from Pixar. It's been getting a little bit trashed on though. Well, it's a lot lower. In fact, this is the second lowest score anything that Pixar has made has gotten on Rotten Tomatoes. But at least it's way more than Cars 2, which got a 38%. The movie looked good from the trailers, but it's beginning. It's been doing too well. But I'll watch it on Disney Plus probably. Let's see. Then there is The Flash. The Flash looked good from the trailers, but the DC universe has gotten pretty disappointing over the last 10 years. But hopefully the new DC universe that James Gunn is leading will redeem it. But we still have 3 movies in the DCEU left with The Flash, Blue Beetle, and Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom. And as for The Flash, it looked good from the trailers, but I want to see reviews first. And also there's Ezra Miller. I feel like they should have just reshot the movie and replaced him with Grant Gustin. That would have worked way better. That's how it should be for the future DCU. Screw Warner for trying to protect Ezra. He needs to be fired already. I'm going to watch The Flash at some point, but I'm not going to see it in the theaters, most likely, unless it gets really good reviews. Then there's Asteroid City. I've never seen a film from Wes Anderson, but it looks pretty interesting, and I might watch it at some point. Then we have what we're talking about today, Indiana Jones: The Dial of Destiny. Ugh. Okay, now this is a movie that I was both excited and skeptical for. I mean, it looked promising for the trailers, but because of, Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, I was pretty skeptical because I hated Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. I'm sure many of you did. I mean, I'm a big fan of Indiana Jones, and I have been for a long time. I love the first and third film. I like A Temple of Doom, but it got a little bit too much with all the gross scenes that get shoved up your face. And there was some kind of and there were some cringe scenes. But at least the last 45 minutes redeemed it. And Kingdom of the Crystal Skull was absolute awful. It was a train wreck. The plot was dumb, cringe, and didn't make sense. And Dial of Destiny apparently has been getting crapped on with a 48%, which is actually a lot lower than the score that the critics gave Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. Even though a lot of the fans hated Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, including myself, the film got a 77% on Rotten Tomatoes. This as a 48%. Yeesh. Gee. That's actually a little bit lower than what the Rise of Skywalker got. Now, I was planning to go see this movie on opening night, but now I'm probably not going to because of how bad the embargo is. Now, there isn't any audience scores, obviously, because this movie's not out yet, and the reason why it already has a score here is from the the test screening at the Cannes Film Festival. So let's see what the critic says here. Although there's a nostalgic rush in seeing Harrison Ford back in action, Indiana Jones: The Dial of Destiny is a largely unnecessary franchise finale. I mean, that does make sense because they really should have ended after The Last Crusade, because The Last Crusade had a perfect ending with them going into the sunset. They were riding horses into the sunset during the ending, and then Kingdom of the Crystal Skull came along with a dumb plot, and Dial of Destiny. It looks promising for the trailers, but it's that feeling the movie is probably gonna suck at this point, unfortunately. But to be fair, it's modern Lucasfilm. I have a hard time trusting Lucasfilm now after the Star Wars sequel trilogy and Kingdom of the Crystal Skull and Star Wars prequels. I don't know what it is with Lucasfilm making bad sequels to their classics from the 70s and 80s. Yeah. And yeah, but yeah, and the movie's coming June 30th. I was planning to see it opening night on the 29th, but now it's getting crapped on. Now, no, there have actually been plans for a fifth and a fourth movie for a long time, as back in 1979, Spielberg said deal with Paramount for 5 Indiana Jones movies, but then they canceled 4 and 5 until later because Spielberg didn't want to continue it, but then George Lucas forced him to make Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, and then Disney bought Lucasfilm in 2012 and picked up Dial of Destiny. And after they acquired the IP from Paramount. So yeah, let's read the 44 reviews. Why are a chasing a thing that drove your father crazy? Exactly our question. Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny is a wild goose chase that goes nowhere. It isn't all doom and disaster, but it is dispiritingly dull. Overlong, no thrills, no fun. Okay, about the overlong part, I think the 2.5 hour runtime makes it because it's the big finale, and it'll probably be one of Harrison Ford's last roles. And so making it 2.5 hours long actually makes perfect sense because it's the end of an era and the end of the franchise before Harrison Ford either retires or, I don't know, dies in the next 10 years because he's getting old. He's like in his 80s now. And let's see what this says. Basically, Dial of Destiny is a compendium of old bits from the earlier films. That it ends at all is a blessing. Okay, but wasn't old bits from the earlier films? Well, just because it is that doesn't mean that it's bad. I mean, look at Top Gun Maverick. And that film has a lot of callbacks to the original, but delivered a fresh, unique experience, and the movie felt very different from the original in a good way. Top Gun Maverick was surprisingly amazing, and it's now one of my favorite movies of all time. But we'll go more into me comparing that to this in a bit, and what I mean. Alright, let's see what it says here. Ford is, of course, wonderful as indeed getting some decent quips and grumpy lines, as dynamic with Waller-Bridge as musically adversarial. It's adventure, though, that everyone really wants from an Indiana Jones movie, and on that front, it delivers. Add to that rousing familiar John Williams score, and it's all amounts to a comforting, if not challenging, reboot. Well, hold on. It's not a reboot. It's a sequel to Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. It's a fifth film. They're not restarting the series with a new timeline or something. It's a sequel, not a reboot. It's a fifth film in the franchise that continues on from the first 4. This is the goodbye which Harrison Ford deserves. The music of John Williams plays again, and the adventure begins again without realizing that we have already been there. Full review in Spanish. A more or less orthopedic chain of vibrant action set pieces. And once again, full review in Spanish. An adventure that, despite stripping itself of all fan service air, feels simulated and forced. I mean, that's kind of how I felt with the Star Wars sequel trilogy. I thought The Force Awakens was decent, but The Last Jedi and The Rise of Skywalker were awful. This is not my Indiana Jones. I mean, fair enough, that's how everybody felt with Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. It's a disappointing facsimile of the much better Indiana Jones films that preceded it. Well, other than an obvious one. Well, actually, it's probably on par with Crystal Skull. What's vexing is a nagging feeling there's a much better Indiana Jones film buried in there somewhere, but would require a feat of archaeology, or at least a rewrite and some judicious editing to excavate it. I mean, that does make sense. That does make sense. There probably was something wrong with the script, unfortunately. And keep in mind that Steven Spielberg was not involved in this film that much. I think he's only an executive producer. He originally was directing it, but then right before the pandemic started, he handed off to James Mangold, the director of Logan and Ford vs. Ferrari. And my biggest problems with some of my biggest problems with the Star Wars sequel trilogy was the script. Fun isn't the most accurate way to describe its excessive antics. There's never a dull moment, but all the globetrotting hula-baloo does verge on exhausting. Stepping in for Steven Spielberg brings the character's adventures to a satisfying close, while Ford revels reprising the role for one last hurrah. It's all pretty goofy and laborious over its 142-minute running time. Wait, didn't Disney say that it was actually 154 minutes? They extended the runtime? I can't remember. I think they extended it by like 12 minutes. A MacGuffin is meant to be just that. An object that characters chase after in the story, what it is and what it does. Usually doesn't matter. Surprisingly it does. Because the movie, it's absolutely bonkers, jaw-dropping climax. It often fizzes as much as it lulls, but in Mickelson's Dr. Schmidt, the film can at least boast a worthy antagonist and one with enough personality to cover some of those cracks. Okay. A film that inherits the directing mantle from Steven Spielberg should know when to step up. It's about time executives realize that the franchises can't be cleanly separated from the visions and talents of those who made them. The camera rarely creates meaning on its own, except when there's a familiar brown fedora somewhere on screen, at which point it charges towards it like a happy pup reunited with its owner, a shot that repeats on at least 4 separate occasions. It counts as a sort of compliment to James Mangold's film until a gleefully absurd ending plays like just another episode of a creaky, unpretentious romp. Okay, fair enough, I guess. A fine fan fiction employing much of what makes this character so special play out new ways while very much embracing the past. When it works, it's excellent, but when it doesn't, you still revel in companionship of old friends. Alright, before I continue with the next, let's see how many pages there left are, okay. There are needs being met here, but they aren't storytelling based so much as stoking the fan base and meeting the bottom line ones. The Dial of Destiny proves that it's possible to keep alive the anti-authoritarian flame and the passion for knowledge that lies at the heart of this immortal saga. This is the final Indiana Jones movie, as it most likely will be. It's nice to see that they stuck the landing. There are so many chase sequences that the movie seems held together with slender bits of plot, rather than the other way around. Worse yet, they're so heavily CGI'd that they come off as grimly dutiful rather than thrilling or delightful. The damn thing is fun. Mangold may not have the young Spielberg's musical flair for extravagant action choreography. I mean, who does? But he is a tougher leader director using a tighter frame and keeping his camera close. The de-aging and other CGI manipulations of Ford's body only serve to demonstrate that Dial of Destiny just wants to turn back the clock into doing something new. Harrison Ford finds a fitting end to one of cinema's greatest action heroes, most iconic roles of his career. With this film, Indiana Jones: The Dial of Destiny is a thrilling, action-packed swan song for the iconic character. It's a vast step up from the muddled mess of Crystal Skull, and while it's not perfect, with its uneven set storytelling, it's not a bad end for our favorite archaeologist, Professor Adventurer. It's a sad and safe ending for a series that once prided itself on big escapades and larger-than-life emotions. Dial of Destiny shows that some relics should just stay buried. And the end of the Dial of Destiny might not be the finest film of the franchise, but it's far from the worst. It's selling entertainment with the legendary character riding off the sunset one final time. Indiana Jones and Dial of Destiny is a bold, bright, and blazingly fun reunion with our favorite hero. It's an improvement on the execrable Crystal Skull, but James Mangold's exhumation of the Spielberg Adventure serial was tame and unnecessary. The jokes, the zest, and the exuberance aren't there. So instead of a joyous send-off for our beloved hero, we get a depressing reminder of how much livelier his past adventures were. This is a big, bombastic movie that goes through the motions but never finds joy much in the process. By John Williams' hardworking score, continuously pushing our nostalgia button and trying to convince us we're on a wild ride. Indiana Jones and Dial of Destiny is a dutifully eager but ultimately rather joyless piece of nostalgic hokum. There are some genuinely moving scenes as we see this fantastic character finally getting ready to hang up his hat for the last time. Thanks, Indy, it's been quite a ride. One can feel the four credited screenwriters grasping at inspiration coming up short. What they did manage to make would be perfectly fine as a standalone adventure film starring other characters, but it's not worthy of the whip. The good news is that it's not as poor as Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. The bad news is that it's not much better. If you join him for the ride, it feels like a fitting goodbye to cinema's favorite grave robber. Alright, last page. Yesterday belongs to us, someone says at one point. When it comes to Indiana Jones, yesterday always will. The problem is that it already did, and today feels like a complete waste of time. Harrison Ford is the hero of the hour. He never loses either his scowl or his dogness. He plays even the flimsiest scenes with conviction and dry humor. His performance carries the movie. Ultimately feels like a counterfeit of priceless treasure. The shape and gleam of it might be superficially convincing for a bit, but the shabbier craftsmanship gets all the more glaring the longer you look. Indiana Jones still has a certain old school class. Okay. We've finally read all the critic reviews. Phew. Okay. So now we read all the critic reviews. Now let's talk about what I expect from the movie. Okay, so the one thing that I expect is I feel like this movie is just another Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. I feel like the movie's got the same problem. The problem with Kingdom of the Crystal Skull was not that it assassinated characters or anything. The problem was the plot. The plot was super dumb. Like, it was aliens that Indy was, like, going after. They were just like aliens into it, and that was just dumb. It wasn't fitting at all. And there was this weird house scene. It was pretty lame. There's also that cringe ant scene at the end. Ew. There's just so many dumb moments in the movie that don't fit in an Indiana Jones movie, and the plot doesn't make any sense. Like, there's also that one scene at the beginning. I forgot what it was. And then there was that wedding scene at the end. Yeah. Yeah, the movie was pretty lame. I feel like as I said before, earlier in the video, I feel like this movie is the anti-Top Gun Maverick. The thing with Top Gun Maverick is that it was the biggest surprise in a long time. Before going into it, I wasn't really hyped for it. The movie just didn't really cross my mind. So I didn't see it in theaters, unfortunately. Though I definitely wish I did. I first watched it a few months ago and it was surprisingly perfect, and it's now one of my favorite movies of all time. And I really wish I saw Top Gun Maverick in theaters last year. The thing with that movie is that it calls back to the original perfectly, and yeah, it calls back to it throughout the movie, but the plot is very unique from it, and it doesn't feel anything like it, and everything, and you don't even have to watch the first movie in order to enjoy the film. Um, as the movie recaps a lot of it, and also and the plot doesn't connect to it too much, and it doesn't rely at all on nostalgia pandering. I feel like this movie is the opposite of that. As I said that before Top Gun Maverick release, I wasn't really that hyped for it, but then later on I absolutely loved it. I feel like this movie is the exact opposite. I was very hyped for this movie, but now that the review embargo has happened, I've lost hope, and I'm not gonna see this. I'm not gonna see this movie in theaters. I'm gonna wait until it's on Disney Plus, and I will critique it then. And what I meant by this being the anti Top Gun Maverick is the fact that so the critics review said apparently it relies on nostalgia, but this time but it seems like nostalgia pandering. This movie seems like nostalgia pandering. I think this movie just calls it. I feel like this movie is calling back to the first four movies too much, and it's just nostalgia pandering. I feel like this movie is just a nostalgia pandering movie, and I don't know who wants to see an old indie who's now in his 80s. Yeah, I think this movie just relies on nostalgia pandering, and it's just super generic. I think the plot is just dumb. That's what I expect. I feel like this movie is gonna rely. I feel like it's gonna rely on nostalgia pandering, and it's gonna have a lame plot just like Crystal Skull did. Anyway, that's it for this. I will see you guys later. Bye bye. If I can find a way to get my mouse.